Hey guys, it's the WalterFootball.com After Dark Show for October 6th, 2024. We're doing our Week 5 NFL picks, the Saturday Notes version of this. It's our third pick show, but I think the most important one because we have all the data, all the injuries. So we're going to go over some of that, most of that, and some player props. And at the end, we're going to post some rankings from one of the top fantasy football rankers on the internet. We'll get to that in a second. Before we do, please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store. All that will be appreciated. As you can see here, we have a ton of t-shirts available. Yeah, all these will be great. We had Kenny wearing the money laundering shirt on Wednesday. I am wearing a brown version of this. You can get these in any color. Some colors look better than others, but yeah. So this brown one, it's part of our fall collection here. So you can get that at the link in the description. That would help us out a lot. Also, please consider super chats, super stickers. John Sanders and Slew have been leading the way here, and just really helping the show out with their contributions. We had some other ones from Stuart Griffin, Kim McNeagle, Andrew Z. Germ, Degeneron, Kevin Kovac, like you guys have been so awesome with the contributions. Just really appreciate it because, like I say, YouTube ads they pay very little, almost nothing. So I'd be better served going out in the street picking up change. So you guys have really helped the show. Just keep it going. So if you guys want to keep doing that would be so awesome. It'd just be really appreciated. Also, you can go to Amazon and buy my books. The most recent book is Jerks of the College Years. We had some good reviews from the listeners here. If you guys don't know what this is all about, I made fun of a lot of weird people I saw at Penn State for 6 years. So as you can imagine, I ran into a lot of weird characters out there. Also, how the 2020 MVP was stolen. If you guys don't know, when when Aaron Rodgers won the MVP in 2020, Brett Favre tried to sabotage Aaron Rodgers that year. I wrote this expose, and you can read all about it here by clicking the link as well. All right, so we are joined by Ben Wasley of Fantasy First Down. Going to put his website on the screen here. And before Ben introduces himself, I will note that Ben is currently ranked 15th in the world in terms of fantasy football accuracy per the weekly ranking. So, Ben, how's it going? And what's the secret to your success in these great rankings?
I mean, look, it's great to be 15th, but last week I was 7th, so I feel like I'm heading in the wrong direction. So I'm like, normally I'd be like, yes, 15's great, but I'm like, no, we're not meant to be going. Let's go that way. Let's go upwards. So, look, I absolutely can't complain. It's actually a public holiday down here on Monday, so I'm like feeling super relaxed. Usually on Sunday, I'm like, got to get everything done so that I'm ready for Monday. But I'm like, look, it's going to be a relaxed weekend for me, so feeling very good.
What is the public holiday on Monday?
It's called the King's birthday, which is absolutely ludicrous because we haven't been part of the UK for over 100 years, but we still get a public holiday for the King's birthday. It's hilarious.
The current King's birthday?
Well, it's not his actual birthday, which is the hilarious thing. We just choose a random date to celebrate his birthday. It's the same date the Queen's birthday was on when she was alive as well. And she's born in April. So I have no idea when the King's actually born. But we basically just celebrate his birthday. Is there any excuse to have a holiday, basically?
I mean, that's nice, but it's kind of weird. Why don't you just have it on his birthday? He was born November 14th, King Charles.
Oh, we're close.
Yeah, it's not bad. You're about a month off. So not terrible. It's not April. So what's this called? The Queen's birthday when she was alive?
Yeah. So so for my whole life, it's always been called the Queen's birthday, and it's only been the last couple of years it's suddenly called the King's birthday, and it's really confusing.
Yeah, that's weird. I don't know. We have like President's Day here. I guess that's like the equivalent. But it's not. It doesn't change, if female president, it's not called Miss President's Day, it's still President's Day. But yeah, we have Sue asking, Ben, can you get a close buzz cut like Walt's Down Under?
Oh, gosh. Look, there's a real thing going on in Australia at the moment, having like really super short on the sides and then like mullet down here.
Yeah.
It's just like I you get it a little bit over there as well, but it's a real thing over here. All of our football players are doing it, and it's just hideous. So I'm probably going to get one of those.
Yeah, I've seen that. I just don't understand. I think it's like one of those things where, in 30 years, people are going to look back. It's like, oh my God, what were these people thinking? Kind of like with bell bottoms in the 70s and et cetera. Let's not discuss the possibility of a female president right now, please, Walt. Okay, fine. We will not. Maybe in the future when we get someone better. DraftKings left the UK and same with FanDuel. I didn't realize that. I know Bovada is leaving the U.S. Slowly but surely. They actually emailed me saying, "Oh, you have to withdraw your money within the next 2 weeks, or it's gone." I'm like, "Okay, let me withdraw my money then." So Bovada's gone, which is, I think, a good thing because they've. I know two people, including Charlie, who they won a lot of money on Bovada and they were not paid out just because Bovada just refused. The one person who won more than anything, like he actually sent me screenshots. I know this is legit. He won about $31,000 on draft props on Bovada, and they did not pay him out. And he sent me email screenshots, and they said that he was part of a gambling syndicate, which is like I don't know what they're talking about. I just followed your picks, so so I'm glad to hear Bovada is closing down. Maybe we had something to do with it because I told everyone not to bet at Bovada. So. Bovada absolutely sucks. All right. So the plan is to better check your make sure you withdraw from Bovada. All right. The plan is to go over the picks and some props, and then we're going to go delve into Ben's rankings, which again are 15th. So can't wait to see what they look like. Let's begin with the early game, which is I guess like after dinner time for you, right? This is it's pretty great for you here, right?
I can actually watch this one. It's going to be very convenient. I mean, it's like 11 o'clock at night, but it's better than nothing.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Jets versus Vikings in London. I still like the Jets. There are no major injuries, but there's sharp money coming on the Jets. The line has gone from 2.5 to 2. Again, I think the Vikings, while they're a really good team, I think maybe a little overrated because they caught some teams in just bad spots. The 49ers coming off that big win against the Jets on Monday night. Then they had the Texans coming off a win on primetime, their first primetime game. Last week they had Jordan Love playing his first game back from injury. He wasn't quite 100%. Again, I think they're a really good team, and they could certainly win this game, but I like the Jets to pull the upset here. Aaron Rodgers, by the way, coming off a loss in his career, is 39-21 against the spread, which is phenomenal. I bet a prop here. It is Tyler Conklin over 23.5 receiving yards. So the thinking here is that the Vikings have not done well against tight ends, including last week against Tucker Kraft. They blitz a lot. They blitz at the fourth highest rate. So Rodgers is going to have to get rid of the ball quickly, and that means Breece Hall and Tyler Conklin. So any insights into this game?
Look, whenever the games are over there, it's always a real lottery anyway. And I feel like when that happens, you kind of want to take the underdog generally. I'm getting put on blast a lot because I've ranked Sam Darnold quite low this week because the Jets secondary is very good and they have excellent cornerback play. And I'm trying to say that Sam Darnold's going to struggle a little bit and probably lacks a little bit of upside that he would have most weeks. And apparently that's a really unpopular opinion. Not sure why, but yeah, that's what I'm getting this week.
Do you think it's crazy to consider Sam Darnold as MVP? As like I hear everyone saying Sam Darnold MVP front runner or MVP candidate, and I'm like, he's not even the MVP on his team. It's Justin Jefferson. I feel like if there's an MVP, it's Justin Jefferson. Do you agree, or am I crazy?
I think that it's shocking how good he's been compared to what a lot of people expected. Now, I've got to admit, going into the season, I always thought he was going to be perfectly functional. I think he's been a little bit better than I expected, but the MVP is not for like a most improved award. It's more of a who is the best player in the league. And there's no way you can justify Sam Darnold being the best player in the league just because the team is winning. That's this weird American football idea that if the team wins, all of a sudden the quarterback is the best player. That's absolutely not how it works. That's why everyone's always going on about how great Eli Manning is. Like, it's not about how many things you win. It's about how good your play is. And his play's been fine, but it's not MVP level. I don't understand it at all.
Yeah, I don't get it either. Speaking of Darnold, I was looking at another prop. I think over half an interception. I think it's like minus 120 on DraftKings. He's thrown interceptions in 3 of 4 games, and now he's playing against the Jets. I feel like it seems like he should be favored to to throw an interception. So I might bet that one. I don't know if I'm going to do a same game parlay for this, just because I don't know. Just the thought of starting my day with just like a blown parlay or something just feels bad. I might do like a smaller parlay. I might do that. So I'll post it later tonight if I do that. But I was to say, our Vikings, a resident Vikings fan says making excuses. I've been on the Vikings the past 3 weeks. I've not like huge bets or anything like that, but I've been on them. So I'm not making excuses for my losses or anything like that. I just think that I was kind of on them because I thought they were in great spots and the other teams were in bad spots. And then he says Jets got their butts kicked against the Niners, beat the Titans when Levis gave them the game, plus the block punt return too. Lost to Denver, LOL. Quarterback had negative passing yards. He's talking about Bo Nix. Jets haven't played anyone, and when they did, they got their butts kicked. That's true. I totally agree, but you kind of have to ask yourself, like, are they still a good team? Are they capable of winning this game? And I think the answer is yes, despite the fact that they haven't really done anything.
I mean, their secondary is the same secondary as last year when they were really good. It's not like those players have suddenly become trash. Sauce Gardner is still amazing. DJ Reed was injured for at least one of those games, and he's still very good. In fact, I think PFF has him ranked as the second best cornerback so far this year. So their secondary is legitimately really good. I know they've had easy matchups, but they can only play who they have to play against. And I don't know that the 49ers really did smash them. It was a lot closer than you might be thinking.
Yeah, it was close for a while. The game kind of got out of hand in the fourth quarter, but it was pretty close. How do you look at the over 40.5? Generally, I like to look at the offensive lines. Both teams have good offensive lines, so I would bet the over if I had to, but I am very coin flippy on my totals. I actually posted my record here. So this is like shows you not to pick my brain on totals. So for totals this year, I'm 31-32. So fine, small sample size. My career on totals, 28.90 and 28.66 plus 75 pushes. So 50.2%, just slightly better than the so, sort of, but I have to pay the VIG, so I'm kind of behind. So that's unfortunately, yeah. Isn't the Jets right tackle? Yeah, Morgan Moses is doubtful, but they have the first round tackle Olu Fashanu to step in, so it's fine. And then every NFL game at that stadium has gone over. Is that true? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. If that's true, then yeah, over sounds better. So maybe I'm on to something there. Let's get to the next game, which is Panthers at the Bears. So I was considering this as my pick of the month earlier, just because I think Chicago is very overrated right now. Plus, they have to go to London, and big favorites, or favorites more than a field goal, heading into London generally struggle. They're 12-19 against the spread. But the Panthers have so many injuries. Like, their defense is already bad, and now they're going to be without Josie Jewell and Shaq Thompson. So if it was just one linebacker gone, I'd be fine with it. But it's two. That means you have cluster injuries, and the middle of the field is just going to be wide open. I have no idea who they're going to play linebacker. Like Cole Kmet, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Swift out of the backfield. Like, it feels like all these guys should have big games, and so I'm less favorable here on the Panthers. I think they're still the right side. I might bet like 2, maybe 3 units on them, but it's not nearly the big play I thought it would be. Any thoughts on this game?
Just back very quickly on that Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Every game at that stadium has had at least 40 points in it, so it is a high-scoring stadium. Okay. I think that overstat's possible. I'm not sure about last year. Last year was Ravens against Titans, and it was exactly 40. That feels like it's probably hit the under, but who knows? Not sure. But yeah, definitely I think a high-scoring game is very possible. As for the Panthers-Bears one, it's really weird because traditionally the Panthers have been very good at stopping slot receivers. That's always been their strength. They've been terrible against out wide receivers. They can't stop the run, but the only person they can stop is the slot receiver. And all of a sudden, there's no Shaq Thompson. They're looking way weaker in that area, and it's really hard to tell, well, how will the Bears attack them? They've got so many options. I suspect they're probably going to run the ball a lot. But yeah, I think probably guys like Keenan Allen would have been previously someone you just couldn't even touch because of the matchup. All of a sudden, it becomes a lot more interesting.
Yeah. So it says Cole Kmet over 2.5 receptions is free money. What do you think about that?
I mean, I don't know it's free money, but I certainly would take it.
Yeah, I would. I think I would too. It just, if Keenan and Allen were out, I think that'd be free money. But it feels like they kind of cannibalize each other. Shane Waldron sucks though. Can't forget that. Yeah. Shane Waldron's play calling has not been very good, especially like those goal line carries. Remember those 4 in a row against Indianapolis? Just so bad. There is just such bad play calling in the NFL. All right, let's get to the next game. We have Ravens at Bengals. So this line still hasn't hit 3. I don't think it will because it looks like there's some sharp money on Cincinnati. I still like the Bengals here. Nothing has really changed. There's no major injuries of note. Like Sheldon Rankins is out, but the Bengals will at least have BJ Hill back, so it's a body to stop the run. And I know this is a bad run matchup for the Bengals, but I think it's a bad pass defense matchup for the Ravens because their cornerbacks, when tested this year, have just really let them down. And the Bengals obviously have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Andre Yoshevich in the slot too. Plus, the Ravens' pass protection, I thought, was a real weakness heading into the year, and it was exposed in the first couple weeks of the season. Not quite as much the past couple weeks as they've been ahead, but if the Bengals get up, I think that Lamar Jackson could feel a lot of pressure from the Bengals pass rushers, who were really good on the edge. And plus, I think Baltimore coming off a national TV win in blowout fashion, I think this is could be a letdown spot for them, even though it's in the division. So I like Cincinnati here. What are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think this is going to be close. I do think the Bengals are going to be able to attack them through the air, but the Ravens can attack the Bengals on the ground. You can run on the Bengals. So I think this is going to be a really interesting matchup to see how that kind of pans out. I think it's one of those interesting situations where the Ravens will probably try to lean very run heavy. And if the Bengals then start to score some points, it'll be really interesting to see whether they do transition to passing or whether they just stick with the ground game. So I'm intrigued to see what happens, but I don't really have any strong feelings about the line.
I bet a prop here. It was Mark Andrews under 25.5 receiving yards. I feel like the Bengals have done pretty well against tight ends, and Mark Andrews he's running fewer routes than Isaiah Likely. He's blocking a lot. Any thoughts on that prop?
Yeah, in games that are close, especially against good opposition, but where the Ravens are winning. So like good opponent, but Ravens winning. Mark Andrews and Isaiah Likely are barely involved at all. They're mostly blocking and they're not running many routes. I think Mark Andrews has 15 total routes the last 2 weeks combined for 2 targets. This feels like it could be another one of those games where they're just using him to block. Likely runs a few more routes and both are barely involved.
Mm-hmm.
So yes.
Okay. So it says Bengals plus 2.5 at even money. Caesar's best I found. Yeah, I'm gonna keep looking. Unfortunately, you haven't found any viable threes, and by viable I mean 3 minus 120. Bagley says least valuable rest of the season. Kareem Hunt, Rico Doodle, as we call him here, and Chase Brown. Gotta drop a kicker, and I need to hang on to my receivers, or I could drop Goddard. I wouldn't drop Goddard. So least valuable rest of the season. I have to think it's Kareem Hunt just because. They said Isaiah Pacheco is out 6 to 8 weeks after week 2. So to do the math, I think he comes back week 10. I drafted him in like the 14th round in most best ball drafts I did this past week, just on the hopes that he would return. I think he could be back for the fantasy playoffs for sure. So, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to have him for the fantasy playoffs, which means I think he's least valuable. What do you think about this?
I mean, my first question is, why aren't you dropping your previous kicker? I mean, that's by far the more obvious option. There is no situation where you should be leaving a kicker on your bench. Now, it is possible, admittedly, you drop your previous kicker to pick up one of these guys as a speculative ad, and then you need to drop someone at the end of the week. I would understand that, but never have a kicker on your bench. You can always stream kickers. My just number one streamer kickers last season finished 3rd overall in points. Streaming kickers is really easy. Having said that, the question you actually asked, I mean, Dowdle is someone that I like because if the Cowboys' run game improves, he is going to be the number one guy. Chase Brown, the issue there is they don't give him any pass blocking snaps at all. He really only works on early downs and like designated routes because they don't trust him to pass block. So that really limits his upside. Even if there's a situation where Zach Moss goes down, they're not going to use Chase Brown in pass protection. And that means that he's not one of the better handcuffs out there, but he's also not someone you can use on a weekly basis. On the other hand, we know that Kareem Hunt could potentially be an every down back, at least for a while. He's just going to have limited upside towards the end of the season if Pacheco comes back. And he's also currently not getting the passing down snaps either. At least he has the potential to do it, though. So I would personally drop Chase Brown. I just don't think that there's as much upside there as there is with Hunt and Dowdle.
Do you think you'd change your kicker stance if he does Brandon Aubrey and doesn't want to drop him? I feel like he's the only one you would maybe keep.
I still wouldn't. I mean, I don't think the Cowboys are looking so good at the moment that you desperately want their kicker. It's not like they're scoring a massive amount of points like they were last season. And he is very good and he is very accurate, but realistically, he's still not even close to the top scoring kicker so far this season.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, he says he drops the kicker defense and then, okay, that makes sense. So that's what you were saying.
Genius.
Yeah. Ball throw more Ravens don't win games. That's definitely true. Especially with Mark Andrews looking so decrepit. All right, so Bills at the Texans. We kind of touched on some bad offensive play calling. And the Texans, I thought, just awful play calling last week where they ran with Cam Akers so much on first and second down, and they just stranded CJ Stroud so often in third and longs. And like to his credit, like he bail them out sometimes. But I don't understand why they were just running Cam Akers into the ground. Like he wasn't getting anything. It was almost they thought it was like hey, Joe Mixon could do this. Cam Akers will do the same thing. It doesn't make sense. Joe Mixon's out again, so it'll probably be more Cam Akers, which is just bad for the Texans. Even though the Bills not great against the run as we saw on Sunday night, but I still like the Bills here. I think they will bounce back. From that embarrassing loss. I love taking good teams coming off embarrassing losses. I also like betting good quarterbacks off defeats as well. So that fits Josh Allen in both regards. And I'm not quite sure about the Texans here. Like it feels like they haven't been very impressive. Like their most impressive win was week 1 against the Colts. And then think about it, like week 2 against the Bears, they kind of struggled to put them away. Week 3, they lost. They got crushed by the Vikings, and then last week they almost lost to the Jaguars. Like Trevor Lawrence hits a deep pass that was wide open. They might lose that game. So yeah, I don't know. Like why is Houston favored here? It just doesn't make much sense to me. So I like the Bills, and a prop I like is Dalton Schultz under 26.5 receiving yards. This feels like he's the forgotten man there. And you have Tank Dell coming back, so that's going to take some target share away from Schultz as well. And the Texans the Bills are really good at tight end against tight ends. Trey McBride only had 30 receiving yards in week 1, so this is what I'm looking at for this game prop wise. What are your thoughts on this game?
I mean, firstly, for me, it's absolutely wild that the Texans are favorites. I don't understand that at all. To me, the Bills should be favorites. Not heavy favorites, but if you put a gun to my head and said who's going to win this game, I would pick the Bills. So I would definitely take them given where the line is. Having said that, I still think it's going to be an interesting game because you can absolutely run on the Bills. So far this season, from a fantasy football perspective, they've conceded 32.5 points per game to opposing running backs. Now, admittedly, a lot of that was Derrick Henry, but they would even the number 1 matchup going into that game. So you would expect the Texans to do a lot of running on early downs again. I don't know, as you said, that's smart play calling, but you definitely can run on the Bills. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how Cam Akers goes in this game and how they choose to use him. I love that Dalton Schultz idea as well. I was really hopeful of Schultz when Brevin Jordan went down. Jordan was taking a lot of Schultz's routes. Once he went down, they just gave him all to Schultz. So he became that 30-plus route guy that you need for fantasy, but they haven't been using him. And with Tank Dell back, that's really going to hurt him. So I agree. I think that's a great prop as well.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see if Cam Akers can run on this team. Just I have my doubts. I don't know if he can run on anyone, given the lack of explosiveness he has with was it 2 torn Achilles already? It's just it's pretty rough for him. So many players are out. Bills, Texans. John says no Shakir or Oliver is huge. Take the Texans. I mean, those aren't cluster injuries. I'm not too concerned. Like Khalil Shakir is not going to move the needle for me. As good as he's been this year, I think Curtis Samuel could be more established here. Dalton Kincaid could have a big game. It could get Dawson Knox more involved. I'm not too worried about that. Ed Oliver, yes, he's more important, but again, it's not a cluster injury situation. So I have no issues taking the Bills. Sue asking, Ben, please advise on 2 of these 4: Pittman, Thomas Jr., Wicks, Shaheed.
I would go with Wicks and Pittman. I really like Wicks this week. We'll talk about that more a little bit later, but I really like Wicks. And Pittman, especially with Flacco playing, I would pick him as the second. The only exception to that would be if the weather is absolutely appalling in that Colts game, then potentially that's going to hurt him a little bit. But at this case, I think it's probably just rain, and he'll be absolutely fine. So I'd go Wicks and Pittman. Thomas is close.
Okay. Let's see here. James Cook under 14.5 rushes. Good. He hasn't gotten more than 11 the last 3 games. He might get more with Shakir out. I'd worry about that a little bit, but yeah, I think you beat Houston primarily through the air. I would go under, but I wouldn't feel like great about it.
I would also go under. It is really hard to run on the Texans. Admittedly, it's partly because they've been ahead a lot so far this season, but it's not like teams that have tried to run against them have had much success. So I think that's a fine bet.
Yeah, Houston so far this year, actually they're in the middle of the pack against the run, so I guess you can run on them. Ken says Diggs revenge game, and then John says revenge for what? Force feeding him the ball for 4 seasons. Yeah, I don't know how, like, I don't see that really. I don't really buy into the revenge narrative unless it's like it's super extreme. Let's see. Worth mentioning that the Packers suspended Dobbs for this week. Yeah, no Watson, no Dobbs. So yeah, the receivers look better for the Packers. So all right, let's move to the next game. And just mentioned the weather potential here. Colts at the Jaguars. Looks like Joe Flacco is going to start. Anthony Richardson is doubtful. So barring a miracle, it's going to be Flacco, which I thought, I've been saying this all week. Now, the difference between these two quarterbacks doesn't move the point spread, but I'd much rather have Flacco for this game than Richardson because the weakness of the Jaguars defense is their secondary. And if you have Richardson out there, he's so inaccurate that, yeah, he's going to deliver some amazing passes, but he's also going to throw the ball over his receivers' heads for interceptions, whereas Flacco is just way more accurate. And we saw last week with Flacco, Michael Pittman Jr. got unlocked for the first time. Josh Downs look great. I think both of these guys are great options here against such a bad pass defense. So yeah, I'm going to the Colts here. I have the Colts in a joint super contest entry with Aton, who used to be our co-host on the Tuesday show. No props here, but I don't know if I'm going to bet this one, but the Colts look good to me, much better than the Jaguars, who've just been a mess. So any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I think this is a good situation for the Colts. I'm surprised that the line is at 3, personally. Jacksonville haven't looked good. Trevor Lawrence hasn't looked good. I know that the Colts secondary is going to struggle, especially I believe Kenny Moore's out, and that's probably going to hurt them as well. But I do still think that the Colts should be able to move the ball with Flacco against that secondary.
Yeah, so we just got a comment about Michael Pittman Jr. Against the Jaguars last year. In the first game, he had 9 catches for 109 yards. Second game, he had 8 catches for 97 yards and a touchdown. That sounds pretty good to me. So,
juicy.
Yeah, I think you can, if you're playing DraftKings, I think you can stack Flacco with Pittman and Downs. That's a super cheap stack. Like, you'll be able to get to 2 stud running backs. So you can get to a Jordan Mason, Kenneth Walker, and Brock Bowers, and maybe even like an Amari Cooper or a Jaden Reed or something like that. Like, you can really have some studs on your roster, on your lineup, just stacking this game. PPR league, start Trey Sermon or how about Brian Robinson Jr.? I think it's Robinson because Sermon I don't think he's a good player. He does nothing in the passing game, but Robinson is hurt. What do you think about this one?
I'm higher on Sermon than pretty much everyone else around. I would still go with Robinson. I just think he's more reliable. I know there's some injury risk there, but there's a significant amount of risk with Sermon as well. So BRJ for me.
Yeah, Uncle Ted says Jags held even Jonathan Taylor in check both games last year. Not the first game because there's no Taylor in the first game. Remember, it was who's the running back for the Colts?
Moss.
What?
Zach Moss.
In week 1 it was someone else. It was Jackson.
Deion Jackson.
It was Deion Jackson in week 1, yeah. And then eventually they went to Zach Moss. But Deion Jackson was pretty bad. I don't know about the second game, but yeah, the Jaguars play better against the run than the pass for sure. The Black Josh Allen is good to go. And so Trey Tucker is fire if Surtain shadows Myers. That is I don't know. I mean, we'll get to that game in a little bit, but I couldn't decide if I thought that that Surtain would shadow Jacoby Myers. Like, is Myers that high caliber receiver enough for them to have Surtain follow him? Or do you think are Surtain going to stay on one side? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
I mean, I feel like Myers spends half his time in the slot anyway. It's not like Surtain's got to follow him there, so I don't know that it's going to be that helpful.
Yeah. Trey Tucker, St. Brown Light. Well, we'll see where Ben has Trey Tucker in his rankings. I'm kind of curious to see that one. All right. So next game here, we have Dolphins at the Patriots. And yeah, get ready for to throw up in your mouths a little bit here. I decided that I'm going to bet the Dolphins. And I know that sounds awful just based on how they played the past 2 weeks, ever since Tua got hurt. But if you think about it, I have this rule with backup quarterbacks. I've done the research. Backup quarterbacks against top 12 defenses have been awful. Just they're like 30% to cover. Backup quarterbacks against defenses that are middle of the pack or bottom 10, they are about 65% to cover. So as bad as the Dolphins have been, you kind of have to consider who their opponents have been. So they had Skylar Thompson going against Seattle. Seattle's 9th in defensive EPA. Despite what you saw against Detroit Monday night, that was just Detroit just being awesome. Seattle shut down their other opponents. And then the following week, they had the Titans, who were 7th in defense. So Tyler Huntley against the 7th ranked defense. Now the Dolphins play the 25th ranked defense, a defense that's not going to have Jabril Peppers. It's not going to have Kyle Duggar, so they have cluster injuries at safety. So I think the Dolphins are actually going to look much better offensively. Now, they're not going to be a juggernaut like they were at Tua, but I think they can score 20, 23 points in this game, and I think that'll be enough to beat the Patriots because the Patriots have severe offensive line injuries. They just lost David Andrews to IR. They lost their left tackle, Caden Wallace, to IR. They already had Cole Strange on IR. They have 4 other guys who are questionable. Like, I don't know what sort of offensive line they're going to be able to put together in this game, except for Michael Onwenu, a right tackle. Like, it just feels like they're going to have 4 turnstiles here, and the Dolphins are be able to get a lot of pressure on Jacoby Brissett, and the Dolphins are going to get the run. So it's not like the Patriots going to establish Stevenson, who, by the way, has fumbled in every single game this year. So he may not be long for as a starter in the NFL if he keeps fumbling. And then also one last thing, the Dolphins are getting Teron Armstead and Kendall Fuller back from injuries, which is huge. So yeah, I like the Dolphins here. This is going to be a 3 or 4 unit bet, despite me saying throughout the week that I wasn't going to bet this. My player prop here is Devon Achane under 55.5 rushing yards. Just despite what I said about the Dolphins being better this week, the Patriots have the number 1 pass funnel in the NFL. And they've obviously been really good against the run. And the Dolphins haven't been able to run block very well. And Raheem Mostert's coming back. So he might take some carries away from Achane. I think it's going to be hard for Achane to hit 55.5 unless he breaks a long run, which is always possible. But I think he's probably going to get like 30 or so. So what are your thoughts on this game?
I agree with you on Achane. I think it's a tough matchup for him and a tough situation with Mostert back. I was about to say this. Gerard Mayo came out and announced that Antonio Gibson will be starting. Now, starting is a very vague term. It literally means he'll get the first snap, potentially the first drive, but they've kind of been moving slightly towards Gibson of late, and as soon as Stevenson fumbled, they really punished him for it. So I do feel like they're trying to make a very clear statement here. Having said that, if it doesn't go well, they will just go straight back to Stevenson anyway. So I, for the first time, have Gibson ranked ahead of Stevenson because of that. I do think there is a reasonable chance that he works as the legitimate starter this week, but I don't see this being a real long-term option. I still think they just gave Stevenson a massive contract. They're not going to totally discard him and forget about him, but I feel like in this game, we could see a lot more Gibson than we're used to. Not really sure what impact that has because this is going to be an absolute dumpster fire regardless.
Yeah, I think it's almost like a wake-up call. Like, hey, by the way, you got to stop fumbling here, and this is your punishment. I think they'll go back to him as well. And Gibson's not that good of a player, you know. It's not like he's some promising rookie or anything. We've seen him run before. Pauline says, Waddle over 34.5 receiving yards is a lock if Gonzalez shadows Tyreek Hill. Yeah, I mean, it is, like I said, number 1 pass funnel. I would bet the over on Waddle and Hill. if I had to. I just think that the number one bet in this game is HN under. But I do like where you're going with that. Think about how much Rico Doodle will skyrocket if he has a good game Sunday night. Well, against the Steeler defense, that'd be something. Dusto asking, your McBride can't go tomorrow and I have to pick up tight end. Who should I drop? Spears, Chase Brown, Benson. I'm a James Conner owner. I'd lean toward Benson. I hate owning your own handcuffs. And I don't know if Benson's that great. And plus, like, you need Conner to get hurt. I don't think anyone's like dying to pick up Trey Benson. You know what I mean? Like, whereas if Chase Brown is dropped, someone's going to pick him up. If Spears is dropped, maybe someone picks him up. But Benson, I feel like I don't think anyone's going to pick him up. What are your thoughts here?
Totally agree. I drop Benson. We have no evidence to suggest that he would work as anything but an early down banger, and that doesn't have that much value in that offense. James Conner's got so much value because he's really good and because they use him on all three downs. I don't know that they'll do that with Benson initially. I think you'd see a whole lot more Demicado. So I've no Benson. I haven't had any Benson since this season at all. I just don't think he has any value.
Yeah, I don't think I've done like 40 or 50 best ball drafts, maybe more. I haven't drafted Benson in a single draft. Benson. Okay, so next game is Browns at the Redskins, the final early game here. We still don't have the updated status on the Cleveland offensive lineman, which is absolutely huge for handicapping this game. They're getting Ethan Posick back. He got knocked out of last week's game, which is nice, but we're still waiting on Jedrick Wills, Jack Conklin. Both of them were DNP on Wednesday and then limited Thursday and Friday. So that's better than it was last week when they were all DNP. And the fact that they weren't ruled out yet, I think is great because I think it's the first time that at least one of them hasn't been ruled out ahead of the game. So that's promising, but still, if they're both ruled out Sunday morning, I'm not going to bet this game. If one plays, this is going to be like a 2 or 3 unit bet. If both play, I will be on Cleveland for a lot here because I think Washington's a very overrated team right now. It's nothing against Jane Daniels, has been awesome. Number one offense in the NFL. Although, as I've said multiple times this week, the EPA rankings of the defenses Jaden Daniels has played this year, 21st, 22nd, 27th, and 30th. So they have not played a top 20 defense yet, and the Browns are 12th. So that's something to consider. But the reason the Redskins are overrated is because their defense is ranked 32nd. Like, they can't stop anyone except for Arizona last week. I think Cliff Kingsbury may have known something about them. But coming off such a blowout win against a Cleveland team that's going to be desperate at 1-3, I think this is a bad spot for Washington. So I think the Browns take this one, provided they have at least one of those tackles. Let's see if I don't think I have a prop on this game. I do not. So what are your thoughts here?
I'm inclined to agree. I think the line suggests you have to take the Browns, as you said, assuming that their O-line is at least moderately healthy. You can score on Washington. Nearly every team does, and you can pass on Washington. I've got Amari Cooper very high. I've got Jerry Jeudy very high, for example. I think they could both have big games. I'm also surprised that the total's 43.5. That seems kind of low to me, especially because you'd expect the Browns to score some points, and Washington's been scoring points on everyone, admittedly weak defenses, but I do feel like this is kind of game that could have some scoring in it. So I would consider the over, even though, as we said, over-unders are a little bit of a lottery ticket.
I have to ask you, if you're playing a DraftKings, and I know that's not available where you are, but like basically you're trying to stack and try to outscore 300,000 people, or if you're in a spy single entry contest, it's like 4,000 people. Who would you stack with with the receivers? Would you go Deshaun Watson with Amari Cooper and maybe someone else? Or would you go Joe Flacco with Pittman and Downs? Or would you go Huntley with Hill and Waddle? Like, yeah, pick one. Which one do you prefer?
I mean, it definitely wouldn't be Huntley with Hill and Waddle. I've yet to see the Dolphins have any success with a backup quarterback. I think it's going to really depend on the Browns O-line. If their O-line's healthy, then I would go for the Browns guys. I feel like that Jeudy has been getting a lot of targets and he could have a big game. I feel like Cooper's always got massive scoring upside. So I like that situation a little bit more than the Colts situation, but they're both pretty good, honestly.
Okay. I think the solution might be the Colts with Amari Cooper, or you could do the Browns with the Colts receivers. I don't know. I do want to get those guys in the lineup, and like I said, they're all cheap. So you can get 2 stud running backs and Brock Bowers, who I like a lot. We'll get to him in a second. Braylon Allen could have a huge rushing game against Minnesota. Yeah, maybe. I do think, I don't know, Minnesota is what, 7th against the run, I think, if I remember correctly. No, they are 6th in rush defense CPA. So I don't know. I mean, it depends if it depends on how much of a fraud they are, and I don't think they are. I'm just saying that, like, it is possible this is kind of like a Cinderella, a carriage turning into a pumpkin situation, given how many good situations they've had. But like I said, I think they're a good team. They're coached very well. I don't think they'll implode, but if they do, then they might be onto something. All right, so the first of the late afternoon games, we have Raiders at the Broncos. I initially was planning on betting the Raiders here, especially when I saw it got to 3. And I saw a lot of sharp money was coming on Denver, and I was like, why is that the case? The Raiders have so many injuries. It's kind of ridiculous. Just to run through them. So Devontae Adams obviously out. Max Crosby very questionable. He's only had 1 limited practice this week. Thayer Munford, the right tackle, is out. Dylan Parham, who's been their best lineman this year, he is questionable. Divine Diablo, the linebacker, is questionable. Colton Miller is banged up. This team is just a mess right now. But I still don't like Denver. I think Denver caught 2 teams napping. They had Tampa after that Lions revenge game, and then they had the Jets before they had to fly out to London. So I think they got lucky in their spots here. So I'm not going to touch this game from a betting perspective. However, I am taking Brock Bowers over 43.5 receiving yards. The Broncos are very weak to tight ends. They blitz at in a top 3 clip in the NFL. So that kind of says that the quarterbacks have to release the ball quickly. So it's the running backs and the tight ends, and that's why tight ends have torched them for the most part. Not last week, but that was a pouring rain. So I think Bowers bounces back here, especially with Surtain maybe taking away one of the receivers or staying on one side. So what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, one other injury you didn't even mention for the Raiders is Zamir White, which means Alexander Mattison probably starts admittedly. Madison's been heavily involved anyway, so it's not going to make a massive difference, but Mattison suddenly becomes the fantasy option. Excuse me. So that's a little bit interesting, I guess. I do think the Bowers could have a good game, but we also saw with Devontae Adams out, they used a lot of 12 personnel, and it was Harrison Bryant getting a lot of the targets, which is a little bit strange. I'd expect that to right itself a little bit this week, and we do see a lot more Bowers. Bowers had opportunities. He dropped an easy catch last week, for example, that would have given him a chunk. So I think that Bowers is a good pick this game. I wouldn't be betting this game, but if I had to bet someone, I'd still bet the Raiders because I agree. I don't think the Broncos are legit.
Yeah, I think they'll regress to the mean here. Next game is Arizona at San Francisco. This is one of my highest plays of the week. Arizona just got embarrassed last week, and I love going with teams that were blown out. I think Arizona's play a lot better, and it was 2 weeks ago where they gave the Lions all they had, and I think they just suffered a letdown. They were favored over Washington, and Cliff Kingsbury was going against them. So, like I said before, I think he may have known something about them. San Francisco has so many defensive injuries. You already had Drea Greenlaw, but now Fred Warner is very questionable heading into this game. Only 1 limited practice. So even if he plays, he may not be 100%. Yeah, Javon Hargrave is on IR. They already lost Eric Armstead in the offseason, so their defensive interior is pretty weak. Talanoa Hufanga has been out. And given that they have Seattle in 4 days, so they might be looking ahead. They might think to rest some of these guys. George Kittle, by the way, also very questionable. So they may rest these guys ahead of the Seattle game, which is much more important to them because it's Seattle versus San Francisco for the division. So I think Arizona is going to. This is Arizona's Super Bowl, I think, and if they lose this game, they're 1-4. They're pretty much out of it. So this is their last chance. I think they give the Niners all they can handle. I think they could potentially pull the upset, but I think this is going to be a 3-point game. San Francisco wins. So what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think the Cardinals are one of the best 1-3 teams around. I feel like they've got a really good chance of covering. There are a lot of question marks here from a fantasy perspective. Trey McBride being out and Trey McBride potentially being out and George Kittle potentially being out. It's a little bit of a fantasy headache for people. So if you've got any tight end in this game, you kind of need to have another option available to you, or you at least need to be in a situation where you can get one, because otherwise you're going to be in big trouble. I could see both of those guys sitting potentially.
Yeah, I think so too. I think Kittle more likely than McBride, but given that the Thursday game, but yeah, they could both be out. All right, next game is Packers at the Rams. So I'm warming up to the Rams a little bit. I'm not going to bet them just because I think the Packers may not be 100% there with Jordan Love. Like he posted some amazing stats last week, but he didn't play well when the game was pretty close in the first half. He threw some ugly passes, one horrible interception, and then he got going the second half. But I mean, how so? Like that was against like a prevent defense. Like the Vikings were just trying to get the game to end. And then Jordan Love just took advantage of that. And I just don't know if he's going to be 100% here. The Rams are getting Darius Williams back from injury, which is huge. He's the number one cornerback. So he's going to be able to slow down the Packers a little bit. And the Packers without two receivers, Watson and Dobbs are out. I still like Reed and Wicks a lot, but their depth is suddenly like pretty shot. Like they're going to have to rely on Malik Heath, Bo Melton. What if one of Reed or Wicks goes down? Like suddenly they're only going to have one viable receiver. I do like Josh Jacobs here. I bet his over rushing yards. Let me get the exact number on that. It was 66.5 over rushing yards. The Rams are one of the worst tackling teams in the NFL, so I think that's going to benefit Jacobs. We just saw DeAndre Swift kind of revive his career against these Rams. So I think if he could do that, I think Jacobs will do that as well. And I think he's a regression candidate to score touchdowns. He has no touchdowns on the year, but I think he's sixth in like goal line carries. So he's going to get there eventually, and this might be the game. So I like Jacobs a lot here. So what are you thinking here?
Yeah, I agree. I was actually looking at Jacobs' red zone usage this week as well because I was so confused by the fact he has no touchdowns and yet he's getting used so much. Mm-hmm. This is a weird game where the total's very high, but neither team has any pass catches. It's very strange. So I find it hard to imagine this being an over game, but I mean, with these two defenses, you just never know. There's so many injuries with both teams' wide receivers. The wide receivers on the Rams was really weird last week. They finally seem to have settled on some sort of rotation. It seems to be Atwell and Whittington. But I don't know that I'd really want to trust either. Maybe Atwell for fantasy. For the Packers, I really love Wicks this week. Wicks is getting so many targets at the moment. The only issue we had before is that he and Christian Watson were splitting snaps in that same role, but it's a high-value role. Now with only Wicks in it, all of a sudden Wicks gets a lot of targets. It'll be interesting to see what they use with Jaden Reed. Jaden Reed hasn't played a single snap outside 11 personnel so far this season. Are they really going to trust Bo Melton and Malik Heath to be playing on 12 personnel and on all those downs? Or are they going to use Reed a little bit more? I kind of hope they use Reed a little bit more. It'd be good to see him doing something a little bit different, but we haven't seen him do that in the past. So I think this is going to be really interesting to see how both of these teams use their players. The other thing to keep in mind is that Tucker Kraft's been a real fantasy darling this week. He tends to not get used very much when they've got the lead. When they've got the lead, they just run the ball. They use quite a bit of Luke Musgrave. They don't use a lot of routes for their tight ends. So I can imagine a situation where Tucker Kraft has a quieter game this week and disappoints a lot of people.
I can see Tucker Kraft being one of the highest owned tight ends in DraftKings this week, and I agree. I think people could be disappointed in him, and I think if memory serves correct, I think the Rams have been pretty good against tight ends this year. They avoided George Kittle in week 3, but still, for the most part, they've kind of shut down tight ends. So that's something to keep in mind if you want to play Tucker Kraft. So the last of the late afternoon games is Giants and Seahawks. This was another game I was planning on betting, and then the injury report swayed that away because Malik Neighbors is ruled out. And generally, like, I don't want to react to just one injury. You know, like I've mentioned cluster injuries before. It's generally like when multiple players at the same position are out, that really hurts the team. So generally, if it's only one player, like, you know, a Khalil Shakir, for example, it's not going to really affect my my prediction of the game or my handicapping. But the problem is, like, Malik Neighbors is such a huge part of that offense. Like, all of it funnels through him. And so with him out, I just wonder how the Giants are going to move the ball against this 9th-ranked defense. Is it going to be like 2-yard passes to Wan'Dale Robinson? Is it going to be ineffective downfield shots to Jalen Hyatt? Is it going to be like trying to establish Tyrone Tracy? And I kind of like Tracy this week on DraftKings. He's 4,300 only, so very cheap. But still, it feels like a game that's going to be like 10-3 heading into the fourth quarter. And like, if you're on the Giants +7, you're like, come on, just hold on. I would just want to salvage this push and then the Seahawks are going to get the garbage touchdown at the end and win 17-3 or something stupid like that. So I'm off this game. I think I'm not going to bet this one. What are your thoughts on this one?
I am not convinced that the Seahawks defense is actually any good because they allowed 20 points to the Broncos and to the Patriots. They shut down the Dolphins, but it was the Dolphins without Tua. And then they got absolutely spanked around by Detroit. So I don't know. The Giants isn't very good, but I'm still not convinced the Seahawks are very good either. I could imagine that someone like a Tyrone Tracy is going to have a solid game. Last season, Seahawks were top 2 in rushing touchdowns and rushing yards conceded. So there's certainly a situation where you see a lot of Tracy being productive. Of course, there's also a situation where the Giants fall behind early and just don't use Tracy at all. So I'm kind of in that mid-range where he's very risky, but he's got upside. And if you're in a situation where you need an upside play, I think Tracy's the guy. Wan'Dale Robinson's another interesting one. He's had like 13 targets each of the last 2 weeks. And now Malik Neighbors is out. Now, admittedly, the Seahawks don't allow a lot of points to the slot. But who else are they going to use? It has been Wan'Dale Robinson has been their number one target, even when Neighbors has been there. It's just that Neighbors gets the bigger plays. So I can imagine that Robinson is going to be fantastic in PPR. It's just that his upside is lacking because he's not going to be able to do much with it.
I'll say this about Seattle's defense, which I like the word you used, spanked in Detroit. They get a bunch of front 7 players back from injury. They didn't have Leonard Williams last week. They didn't have Boye Mafe, and they didn't have Jerome Baker. All 3 are due back this week. So I think they'll be better. And it feels like Seattle's one of those teams where, if they're playing, I feel like they could sit on a bad defense and or a bad offense. And if they're going against a great offense, it's going to be tough for them. But I just think Mike McDonald is like one of those coaches who can really just really frustrate a bad offense that has a lot of flaws. And without Malik Neighbors, just feels like where are the Giants' explosive plays going to come from? I don't see it. It's just going to be such a slog this game. And like the problem with Seattle is like all right, you might be wondering, why don't you bet Seattle? Seattle has San Francisco in 4 days, and they've had such a tough travel schedule. So like week 2, they're at New England, East Coast obviously. Week 3, they fly back to the West Coast to play a game. Week 4, they go back to Detroit, which is in the Eastern time zone. They play a Monday night game, and on a short week, they travel back to Seattle. So this is a really tough spot for Seattle, and also Seattle. They tried so hard in that Detroit game. They fell a little bit short. Now they're big favorites. This is kind of the same situation as the Bengals were in against Washington, where the prior week they put their hearts into that Chiefs game. They lost. And then they were huge favorites, and then they lost to Washington. So I could see Seattle having a letdown. That's part of the reason why the Giants look so appealing. But without Neighbors, I just can't get to this game. Geno's a stud. He's been great this year, except for passing touchdowns. Feels like the running backs have been siphoning all the touchdown work. So I feel like he's another regression candidate, positive. So. All right, so Cowboys, Steelers. Steelers are favored at 2.5. I can't find a good 2.5 though. It's like -2.5, -120, which I'd prefer over -3, but still, I like the Steelers a lot. The Cowboys have had so many opportunities to bounce back off of blowouts. Like week 2, they got blown up at the Saints, and you think, okay, they're going to bounce back against the Ravens. They get blown out again. So they get blown up by the Ravens. You think, they're going to bounce back this time. So they play the Giants, and they barely beat the Giants. This team is not good, especially without Micah Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence. Like rushing the quarterback from the edge was like the only good thing they did outside of throwing to CeeDee Lamb. So outside of CeeDee Lamb, that stuff, like what do they do well? Or what do they even do like on a mediocre basis? Like they can't run the ball. They can't pass protect. They can't run block. They can't throw to the other receivers, not named Lamb, because they all suck, like Jones Tolbert, like who cares? They can't rush the passer without Parsons and Lawrence. They can't stop the run, and they can't cover because Trayvon Diggs is banged up and DeRon Bland's already out. So what why is Dallas even like +2.5 here? I feel like they should be at least +4.5, 5.5. Pittsburgh I feel like it's a much better team. And by the way, Dallas has a history of just not being able to beat good teams. So I like Pittsburgh a lot here. I have not posted my props yet. I will look into that after the show. But what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, look, there's a couple of guys who it feels like are going to have big games here. Najee Harris is one of them. You can definitely run on the Cowboys, and they don't have Jalen Warren and they don't have Cordarrelle Patterson. So unless you think that Aaron Shepklin, there's no way that's how you pronounce his name, but you know what I mean, is going to be taking a whole heap of touches. So Najee should have a really big game here. Also, the only way you can really target the Steelers is through the slot. The Steelers concede most of their fantasy points to slot receivers, or at least to guys lined up in the slot. So this feels like a situation where we see a lot of CeeDee Lamb, a lot of Jake Ferguson, and the rest is just an absolute mess. So I agree. I think the Steelers are going to win this easily enough. Would I back them with that line? Probably, yeah, especially with all the injuries to their defense. They've got no D-line at the moment. It's going to be ugly.
Did Ryan Flournoy enter in your rankings at all? We'll get to them in a second.
I think I'm expecting Jalen Brooks to be the third guy with a little bit of Turpin.
Okay, interesting. I remember Flournoy being good in the preseason. I was like, maybe this will be a good opportunity for him. I wasn't sure. I know he's the bare minimum on DraftKings for the showdown, so I threw him in there just to be able to get all the other top guys in the lineup. So I'm just hoping for like 3 catches or something stupid like that.
Well, he's been inactive the last couple of weeks, which is a bad sign. But it is entirely possible that Brooks is banged up as well. So if Brooks is out, then all of a sudden Flournoy is definitely going to get used.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the Monday night game. So the Saints have a bunch of injuries. I'll read them off here in a second. But the Chiefs typically don't play to margin, especially early parts of the regular season. This is a team, if they're favored by 5, they win by 3. If they're favored by 7, they win by 6. They just never quite get there. And why would they? Like, they've won 3 Super Bowls. They know it's a long season. Like, it doesn't feel like a game where they're gonna be like, oh, we need to go all out 100% here. They're coming off a win in the division against the Chargers. They're 4-0. And who are the Saints to them? They see the Saints once every 4 years. So for the Saints injuries, you have Willie Gay's out, Taysom Hill, Cesar Ruiz, Shane Lemieux, Peyton Turner. It feels like Ruiz and Lemieux is the 2 big ones there. Taysom Hill is the big name, but more offensive line injuries for a team that's already down. Their center, Eric McCoy, they're already down. The right tackle, Ryan Ramczyk. So losing 2 more linemen here just feels like a big deal, especially against a team with Chris Jones and George Karlaftis. So I'm not in love with that. I still would take the Saints if I had to in like an office pool situation, but I don't think I'm going to quite get to betting this game. If I do, it's going to be the bare minimum. So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I agree. With that line, I'm taking the Saints, but I don't feel great about it. It feels like the Chiefs should win this one because that's what we do. But it's going to be pretty ugly. The lack of pass catches is interesting. I don't believe that Xavier Worthy is going to suddenly step up and be a number 1 receiver for them. I think we probably see a lot of Travis Kelce and Noah Gray. We saw Kelce finally get the game that he should be getting last week, and I feel like we're going to see more Kelce this week, even though it's not a great matchup for him. I'm lower than most people on Alvin Kamara this week, but you absolutely still have to start him. The guys that I'm particularly nervous on are some people like Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed, who you're kind of in the habit of starting. I don't know that you really want to start them this week against the Chiefs. I feel like that pass rush is going to get home quite a lot, and it's going to be very difficult for them to use their downfield guys. So I think it's going to be a bit of an ugly game. I'm surprised the total's that high realistically. I feel like this could be a bit of a grind fest. Yeah,
this seems like 20-17 to me. I agree. I think the under is the way to go there. Like I said before, I'm 50-50 on coin flips. So.
Yeah, don't trust those.
Right. Do you think Boise State running back is the best running back in college football? As for draft eligible, I think he's in the first round of our mock drafts, but the situation is pretty fluid, so we'll see. All right, let's get to Ben's rankings here. So from last week, we learned that green is great matchups, red is negative matchups. So this is the top 10 here. Just starting with Josh Allen, then Lamar Jackson, Jane Daniels, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy, round out the top 5. All those make sense. I think everything here looks good to me. I don't have I had some issues like with Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson, like how to rank those two. I put Allen ahead of Jackson like you did, but I think it's super close. So anything stand out here? I do like Justin Fields against Dallas. I think he could have another good game. He's been erratic because like he didn't run very much to start the year, but now he is, and so I just think that he's getting more comfortable. So, and that, by the way, that's Kyler Murray at number 10. I think it's like half cut off. So, any thoughts here?
Yeah, I actually, since Khalil Shakir has been out, I've actually moved Lamar Jackson above Josh Allen just quite recently, but I keep flip-flopping them. I just can't decide. But realistically, I don't think there's many people out there that have both Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen, and if you do, well done. I don't know what you did. But look, I think it's one of those weird weeks where Jordan Love and Brock Purdy are just so high up because of their matchups. It's weird having Jordan Love up there with so many injuries, and yet you just feel like they're going to be able to pass the ball on the Rams. But it is possible we see a lot of Jacobs and he busts. Joe Burrow, I actually feel really good about. I keep being tempted to move him higher up. And I think if you want someone that's just a little bit safer, I feel like he's probably safer than both Love and Purdy. Justin Fields, I'm really nervous about them just running the ball 100 times against Dallas. It feels like something they could probably do. So in this situation, I moved him down a little bit because of that.
Yeah, I think the only place we have to decide Allen versus Jackson is DraftKings, where Josh Allen is 7,700 and Lamar Jackson 7,500. So very, very tight there. Or you could just not play either of them and go super cheap like Flacco or Deshaun Watson, or if you're more daring, Tyler Huntley, which I wouldn't. I agree with you. I don't think I'd do that. And what hurts that is that Tyreek Hill is so expensive still. So yeah, I think I'd rather go cheaper just because there's so many running backs I want to get to. A lot of great options this week. All right, so this is 11 to 30. Baker Mayfield 11, then Mahomes at 12 with the red. Yeah, Mahomes just. So I was so excited to get Mahomes in the 6th round of one of my fantasy drafts, and he just hasn't done anything for me. Although I'm still the 2nd highest scoring team in the league, but still, he has been such a big disappointment so far. You have Richardson here. I'm kind of curious where you're going to Flacco. You get to him in a second. And then you have Lawrence at 14, Watson at 15, and so on. You guys can see the screen here. Does anything stand out to me? Okay, you have Flacco down there at 29. Just got to him there. So kind of curious how you would, or if you'd alter that at all. So what are your thoughts here on Flacco now that he's projected to start this game?
Yeah, I meant to change the graphic. I couldn't be stopped, if I'm completely honest. I moved Flacco up to 12 originally, and I've kind of flipped him around between 12 and 13. Kind of would have liked to move him a little bit higher, but obviously Baker Mayfield's locked in because he's already played. And I just can't move Kyler down outside the top 10. So I think probably Flacco's 12, unless that game has a lot of rain, in which case I might ease off him a little bit. I think all of Flacco, Lawrence, and Watson are really interesting streamers this week. It's just one of those situations, though, where it's not like you can drop someone like a Mahomes to pick up Flacco. So even though I might have him ranked higher, I'm not suggesting that you necessarily need to get Flacco in and get him involved. He's really just an option if you've got someone like, I don't know, a Goff on a bye week, or alternatively, if you've got someone like a Dak Prescott or a Sam Darnold, then I'm probably considering bringing in those other guys, and it's being reasonable to have 2 quarterbacks.
Yeah, makes sense. And we had an answer there with you have Flacco ahead of Watson on the adjustment there. So I think what I'm going to do is have Flacco with Pittman and Downs, and also Amari Cooper. I think that's where I'm going to go with my lineup here, because I some people play like 150 lineups in DraftKings, which I think is like, I get it. It's kind of insane. I just like to have like one lineup that I just kind of like change throughout the week. I enter into the single entry. So, all right. So we have running backs now. I was kind of curious where you had Mason versus Henry, and I agree with this. Jordan Mason number 1, and then Henry 2, followed by Kyren Williams, Kenneth Walker. I love Walker this week. And then Alvin Kamara you have with a bad matchup, but still 5, and then Aaron Jones is 6, Bijan 7, Hubbard 8, Breece Hall 9, James Cook 10. Hubbard, I love Hubbard as well, but not nearly as much as the other guys. And like I said, you can get to the 2 top guys or 2 of the top 4 guys if you go cheaper at receiver, which I think is pretty interesting. Want to expand on anything here?
Look, I love Jordan Mason and Derrick Henry this week. They're way above everyone else. If I'm playing DFS, then they're the guys that I'm trying to get in because they just have massive upside. We've seen what Derrick Henry could do, and you can just imagine a situation where the 49ers go, let's just run this game out and give the ball to Mason a whole heap. You've always been able to run on the Cardinals, and I feel like this is a situation where we could see a massive amount of Jordan Mason. I don't feel very comfortable having guys like Williams and Walker that high, but you can definitely run on the Packers, and I can imagine them filtering a lot of this gameplay through Williams. And we've seen the touchdown upside of Walker, so I'd still rather have him over those bad those bad matchups with the guys like Kamara and even Aaron Jones against the Jets. It's like an awkward situation, but I can't imagine them going to throw on the Jets, so that would mean that you're just going to get a whole lot of Jones. It's actually a really ugly week for running backs realistically this week.
Kind of surprised Josh Jacobs is here, so let's see where he is at number 11. There we go. Josh Jacobs 11, Najee Harris 12. By the way, did you hear what the Colts players said of Najee Harris? Did you? They called him soft. So it's like the last thing you want to be called as an NFL player. He just had a bad game against the Colts, but yeah, I mean Dallas has such a bad run defense that you'd think he'd be able to respond. Brian Robinson Jr. with the injury is still 13. That's interesting. I don't know what to make of his injury. Just a big question mark. Connor ATN. I really hate ATN. That's like my one disagreement here. Like I think he's man. I think Bigsby's getting like the goal line touches. I don't know. I feel like ATN's like so close to being benched. We'll see. I don't know. We'll see. Could be wrong. But so Achan, we talked about how we like his under rushing. You have Sermon, as we talked about, 19. Zach Moss, 21. Javonte, 22. Gibson, there we go. Gibson ahead of Stevenson. Tyron Tracy, number 26. As I mentioned on DraftKings, he's only 4,300. To give you a perspective, the two top running backs are like around 8,000. So he's like half the price. And usually like even like the lower tier running backs are like mid 5,000. So that just shows you how cheap Tracy is. Cam Akers 27, Bucky Irving, and then you have Roshan, Rico Doodle down to 30. I agree with that. I'm not going to touch Doodle in that showdown. And then Madison, worth noting that he's starting ahead of Samir White, who's injured. So want to expand on anything here?
Yeah, look, it's one of those weird ones. Like I said, it's a really ugly running back week. I really wanted to move Jacobs and Harris higher. I feel like they also both have really low floors relative to the guys above them. So I didn't, but it's entirely possible that it gets to my Monday morning, your Sunday morning, and I go, I need to take the upside of Jacobs and Harris. I don't really want to have Robinson or Connor or Etienne there. I think they all have big question marks, but I don't trust anyone below them. We talked about Achan having massive risk this week. DeAndre Swift isn't getting the goal line carries, and that's really hurting. I don't think he's had a goal line carry all season. It was Khalil Herbert, and now Roshan Johnson took it last week, but they only got one goal line carry. So we don't know who their goal line back is, but the one thing we do know is that it hasn't been Swift. So it's really hard to rank a running back high when they're not getting the goal line carries. Jerome Ford tends to be better in games where they're trailing, and they are expected to trail against Washington. So that's why I've got him relatively high. Same with Trey Sermon. I think he's going to get a lot of usage there. Hunt's probably going to get the goal line carries, so that gives him upside. Moss gets used a lot more when they're trailing because he is their receiving back and he does a lot of pass blocking. So that's why I've got him a whole lot higher than Chase Brown. I wouldn't most weeks. And then it gets really ugly after that. Everyone below that, they're technically the lead back, but you'd expect their teams to be trailing in most of those games, and it's hard to know how much they'll use them. Cam Akers is interesting, but it's really hard to trust him when he's like one fumble away from getting dropped, and you don't know how effective he's going to be against Buffalo. Roshan Johnson's the only one I think is really interesting. He's available in a lot of leagues, and I think he's an interesting DFS play because if he is legitimately the goal line back like he was last week, all of a sudden it's possible he gets 2 or 3 touchdowns randomly. So he gives you a heap of upside while also being really cheap.
Yeah, Roshan Johnson, that was so frustrating last week because the Bears coaches said that DeAndre Swift was going to get, they were going to get Roshan Johnson more involved. And I assume that meant that DeAndre Swift wasn't going to get that many carries, and he definitely did. So I bet the under on DeAndre Swift's rushing yards, which came back to bite me. So I said in retaliation, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure the Bears coaches are fired. So we'll see if Roschon gets more of a workload this week. I think Tyron Tracy. I like Tyron Tracy this week. Kind of curious why he's 26. I guess like it's the unknown factor. Just don't know what they're going to do. But he can catch passes. I think he can maybe run on Seattle. It feels like if you can move the ball in Seattle, it's via the run. But there might be a blowout too. So I get the risk there, but I don't know. I think he's kind of interesting. I think I'd rather. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the one change that I would probably make looking at it is I think I might move Gibson down a little bit. I just think I don't really trust what they're going to do with their running backs. And I feel like Gibson could probably move down as low as 27 potentially, because I agree those guys should shift up. Tracy would then hop over White. And I do feel more comfortable having Tracy in that like 22 to 24 range now that we know kind of what that game's going to look like with Neighbors out.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then more running backs here. You have Stevenson, who still going to play. 31, Mostert coming back, and then Chase Brown. Justice Hill has been a big part of their passing game, so it makes sense to have him in the flex range. Eckler's coming back from this concussion. Emmanuel Wilson, I think, is pretty interesting because he's gotten some work, this year. I think he's one of the top backups to own. Bigsby, talked about him. I think it's just a matter of time before he supplants ETN. I really hate ETN. And what else do we have here? Elliott's, kind of crazy that people were drafting Elliott. I just didn't understand why. It's not a surprise that he's done so poorly. By the way, I should mention this. Jamal Williams, I think I've drafted him in like almost every single best ball draft I've done in like the 20th round, just because if Kamara goes down, he's the guy, So in an offense that's been good this year. So anything you want to highlight here?
I mean, personally, I just love Jamal Williams. He's hilarious, but also I agree he actually has quite a bit of sneaky upside. There's a whole heap of guys from like that 34 onward range that you really just want on your rosters, but you should have no interest in starting them in a given week. Guys like Braylon Allen have massive upside, and I think someone mentioned earlier the possibility of them having a good rushing game. Realistically, they'll only take Hall off the field if he reaches his total. Basically, they have like a 50-snap cap on Breece Hall at the moment, and they've kind of alluded to this idea, and it's been what's happening in games. As soon as he looks like he's going to get close to 50 snaps, they just start getting Braylon Allen a whole lot more involved regardless of the game situation. So I feel like Allen needs a game with a high snap count, and all of a sudden he's going to be involved. But I don't know that you can ever rely on him because you don't know what their games are going to look like. But you should have a bench full of guys like Tyler Algier, Braylon Allen, Zach Charbonnet, Emmanuel Wilson has that big upside, Tank Bigsby. These are guys that should be filling your bench because one injury and all of a sudden they're a league winner.
It reminds me like remember the LaDainian Tomlinson Chargers, who were like a really good team. Like they would get up so high that their backup would come in, and like their backup would be really good. I can't remember who that was. It might have been Michael Turner, I think, when he was on the Chargers. Maybe I'm making that up, but it was someone, and like people would legitimately start him, even though he's the backup. So I feel like Braylon Allen's like almost that situation, but not nearly as much. The Jets aren't blowing teams out, But actually reminds me of in 2000 when the Rams had the greatest show on turf, that people would actually start Trent Green as the backup quarterback of the Rams. Because the Rams would be up by so much in so many games that Trent Green would come in and play the entire second half, and like he'd have like 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think it was like better than most other starters. It's just kind of crazy how good that team was.
It's like college football, kind of. It's like you watch college football and the good teams will get in. You can still put like backups in fantasy, and they're still going to score you like 15 points.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of bizarre. I've never done college fantasy, but I imagine that's how it goes. It wasn't Sproles. I think it was Michael Turner. I'm going to fact check that. But real quick, let's go to receivers. The top 10. CeeDee Lamb, you mentioned how the Steelers struggle against slot receivers, so it makes sense to have him one. Jamar Chase, I love his matchup, and you highlight that in green. Nico Collins, who I think legitimately you could say, like, if you were to redraft everything and you were playing in a 3-receiver league and PPR, I think you can make the case for Collins to be the top pick. I just right now toward the end of the season, I think you could do that. And it's a tough matchup, and yet he's still in the 4, so that's like saying a lot. And I agree. Jalen Reed 7, and Amari Cooper 8. Want to highlight those two guys. I like them a lot. Justin Jefferson. I think that I'm kind of any reason why Justin Jefferson's on red, or do you think it's a better matchup than most people think? It's kind of interesting.
Let me check my. The Jets have conceded the 24th most points to running backs, and I only do the red for the bottom 8 teams. So they're the 9th fewest points conceded to running backs. So that's why he's not in red.
Okay, interesting. So anything else in the top 10?
Yeah. I talked about Lamb earlier. I think DK Metcalf, the interesting one. There is a world where the Seahawks get an early lead and then just run the game out, and the Walker gets a whole lot of goal line carries, and I think that's a risk. But there's also a world where DK Metcalf once again goes over 100 yards and gets several touchdowns. So he has massive upside, but quite a low floor. I think in fantasy, you've got to shoot for that upside. Nico Collins is looking quite close to matchup proof. That's why he and Justin Jefferson are both up there. So it's really interesting. Some of the names are seeing up there. You would never have expected them. Amari Cooper, I do really like. I believe I'm the highest on all of the Fantasy Pros site for Amari Cooper. His ECR is something like 17 or 18. I don't understand that in this matchup. If both of the tackles for the Browns are out, then sure, I can understand there being issues with getting the ball to him. But there's so much upside starting players against Washington's secondary that I just can't imagine a world where he doesn't have a very good game.
Yeah, me too. And that running back was Michael Turner. So my memory is good in this instance. In 2006, he had like 550 rushing yards. So he would come in behind Tomlinson when they were blowing teams out and just run all over the opposition. So people definitely used him in fantasy. All right, let's get to the next slide here. So 11 through 30. You have Deontay Johnson, who I like this week as well at 11. Harrison Jr. has kind of been. It's kind of weird to call him a disappointment because like you have him 13th, but like you look at like Malik Neighbors and you kind of have to compare the two, So he hasn't quite been as good as Neighbors, but still productive. You have Garrett Wilson at 15, Diggs at 16, so the revenge game for Diggs. Wicks, you highlighted him before at 18, and then Pittman at 20. We talked about those as well. You like T. Higgins at 19. I do as well. I think he can. He's a positive regression candidate. Brandon Ayuk is good. I feel like a lot of Brandon Ayuk fantasy owners are going to be very frustrated with him heading into this week. But you think that you would keep starting him. So do you want to talk about that more, and anything else on this in these 11 through 30?
Sure. Funnily enough, I'm lower than Brandon Ayuk compared to most experts. I still don't feel very good about having him there. I have flirted with the idea of moving Brian Thomas Jr. past him, and I think ultimately I probably will. In that game against Arizona, it feels like it could be a little bit of a shootout, and that we haven't seen enough of Ayuk yet to definitively say, nah, he's not that guy. We've seen him be very productive in the past, and I feel like I'm willing to give him quite a lot of rope because of that, and that's why I'm ranking him that high compared to a lot of the other guys around him. That's the same type of situation that I had with someone like Zay Flowers, for example, who lacks that touchdown upside, but we know he is the number one option in that offense. So you still kind of have to trust that he's going to do something some weeks. It's also why I wasn't like dropping Terry McLaurin extremely low down the rankings, because he is still clearly a number one guy. And obviously we saw he came out last week and looked really good. So he goes back to being a possible starter. Deontay Johnson, you mentioned. He's got 13 targets each of the last 2 weeks. So even though it's not that easy to pass on the Bears, his target volume is absolutely massive. So that gives him a really good PPR floor. And even in half PPR, he's a totally viable option. I also think that Garrett Wilson could potentially have a big bounce back. He goes in that same category as Ayuk, where he's disappointed to this point. But I can't imagine a situation where he has a really big week this week, given they're taking on the Vikings, who concede a lot of points out wide. You mentioned T. Higgins as well. If he scored a touchdown last week and he got close, all of a sudden we're all saying, oh, look, he's back. He had a fantastic week. He was solid. He got like 10 targets. So I can imagine a situation in this game where he has a big week. I obviously really like Pittman and Wicks, I talked about earlier. And it wouldn't surprise me if Jerry Jeudy has a really big game. I've got him higher than most people against Washington, especially as the slot guy. That's a fantastic matchup. So I love Jeudy this week as well.
Yeah, I was talking about Watson before, and you could put Jeudy in there as well with Cooper. So 31 through 50. I was looking for Josh Downs. You have him 37. I think I might, I don't know. I haven't looked at everyone, but I imagine I might be the highest on Downs of everyone on the internet this week. I just think it's a great matchup here against the Jaguars, who just are just so bad against the pass, and I just like what Downs offers that team now that he's healthy. So otherwise, you have Jackson with the Jigba and Christian Kirk here. Does well, before we get to everything else, does that Kirk ranking factor in Evan Ingram's potential absence? Sounds like he is not going to play. Would you move him up or what?
I'd be very tempted to. I think there is, especially with Kenny Moore being out, I think it makes it an easier matchup having the slot guy there. I think I'll probably move Kirk up to 31, and I have already moved Josh Downs up to 33 with the news that Flacco's playing. I made these when it was a little bit unclear, and I kind of just put him somewhere in the middle. But I think Flacco playing definitely gives Downs a whole lot more upside, so I've moved him up there. As you said, it's a really good matchup. Jackson Smith-Njigba is very hot and cold. It's a really tough matchup against the Giants. They are really good against slot receivers just because of their scheme and how they play. So I can imagine JSN struggling this week, but we've seen him have boom weeks, and for that reason, you can't move him down too low because you do risk giving up a lot of points from someone that is a little bit more dicey. Trey Tucker, we mentioned earlier, I've got him in at 43. I do feel like ultimately he's probably going to get a whole lot of Surtain. I feel like Myers spends a lot of time in the slot, and you get a whole lot of 12 personnel as well, and then Tucker ends up copping enough Surtain to be inconvenient. Alan Lazard is one deep option. You can really attack the Vikings through the slot guys, and that's where Lazard's been playing recently. So I think he's an interesting, I assume, very cheap DFS option.
Off the top of my head, I think he's like in the middle of the pack as far as pricing. It's because it's a showdown. It's just a 1-game slate, so he's probably in the same range. I think he's like slightly more expensive than Mike Williams, who I think like Lazard offers better value. Speaking of value, Lazard to score a touchdown in that game is plus 310, so a little bit better than 3-1. He scored 3 touchdowns this year. Now 1 was in garbage time, but still 2 touchdowns. It means like in every other game he scored a touchdown. So you're getting something that's been happening 50% of the time at 3-1 odds. Just feels like a good bet. So I was considering that as well. If I'm doing a same game parlay, maybe I put that in for a high payout. So otherwise, you have Keenan Allen over Dunze, which is pretty close. We're talking about how bad the Panthers may be over the middle of the field, so that makes sense. I agree with what you said about Tucker. Like, he could see Surtain, so that's problematic. We can move on to the next. We can move on to tight ends. Travis Kelce, number 1. You touched on him. With Rashee Rice being out, I agree. Like, suddenly Kelce is unlocked. He's going to have to do more. So, I think that he could definitely be the number 1 tight end this week. Then you have Ferguson, McBride, Kittle, Bowers. Keep in mind, McBride might be out. I love Bowers this week. I talked about him. And so like Kittle could be out, McBride could be out. Suddenly Bowers would be number 3. You have Njoku coming back from injury. And then Tucker Kraft, Evan Ingram, Pat Freiermuth to round out the top 10. Although you have to watch it for Ingram. So a lot of tight end injuries this week. And then you have Njoku coming back from injury, so he may not be 100%. So this is kind of like a muddled top 10 where with all these guys out, like it could be radically different, come Sunday afternoon. So want to touch on this?
Yeah, look, tight end is an absolute minefield at the moment. There's so many injury issues. Ingram, obviously, when I did this, my last night, I don't even know what my last night was for you, I guess, morning. Your Saturday morning or whatever it was. Ingram was expected to play, or at least questionable. Obviously now he's out, so just pretend he's not there. Brendan Strange comes into around 20 or so, by the way, so he's not really a viable option. Kittle and McBride really make me nervous. If you've got either of them, you need to pick someone up. I think Tucker Kraft plays in that same slate or after them. So he's an option, though he might not be available in your league. So you do have to consider options. You might need to go towards someone like a Noah Gray or a Juwan Johnson even, because at least we know they played late. So I don't know. It's hard to feel good about most of these guys. I think Bowers is going to be a solid option. I think Kincaid could be good with no Khalil Shakir. So really, outside that top 6, it's just an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, the time difference is confusing. And sometimes I forget, like, you texted me, and then I texted you back like a few hours later, and then like a minute after I texted you, like you hit me, then I'm like, wait a second, he's probably asleep right now because it's like the middle of the night there. Yeah, sorry if I woke you up with the text. All right, so 11 through 30 tight ends. You have Parkinson at 12, and then Kmet, Tyler Conklin. I mentioned that I like Tyler Conklin this week against a team that blitzes a lot. I feel like he could be more involved. Otten, Ertz, Gesicki. I'm kind of curious, Gesicki versus Eric All. I feel like Eric All has been just, I want to say like more involved, but he's gotten 4 targets, 4 catches each of the past 3 weeks. It feels like the Bengals like him a lot. And I think by the end of the year, he could be ahead of Gesicki. As far as currently, maybe not, but I think it's close. Then we talked about Schultz. I don't like him. I like Hunter Henry normally, but not so much this week. Mark Andrews talked about how we like this under. Noah Gray, you talked about him before. I like Noah Gray as well, especially in DraftKings in the showdown. He's pretty cheap, and he got 4 targets last week, so looks like he's trending well. So with Rashee Rice out, and then let's see anything else here. Jonnu Smith is kind of interesting, I think, for the long haul, just because Tua might be back. I'm just speaking as terms of best ball is concerned, because I drafted Jonnu Smith in like the 18th or 19th round, and I drafted Tua a bunch as well. Just hopefully because as Schefter said, he's going to be back week 8. So you're not going to play Jonnu this week, but I think in a few weeks he might be back on the table. So I also like Noah Fant too this week a little bit. Not starter. I wouldn't like rush to start him, but like if you're really hurting a tight end, I don't think he's that bad of an option given the matchup. But the Giants have been pretty weak against tight ends. So any other thoughts here?
I agree on Jonnu in best ball. He has a lot of upside because he just has those big boom games. I wouldn't want him to start him in normal fantasy, but best ball I think is the best spot for him. With the Bengals, I think Gesicki versus All is really interesting. What seems to be happening, it's a bit hard to tell, but it seems like whenever they're ahead, they use quite a lot of All to help them run the ball, and then he runs the occasional route and then gets targeted a heap out of that. When they're behind, they do tend to use a lot more of Gesicki as kind of like that true route running, pass catching tight end. The problem is, of course, that I think Tanner Hudson comes back potentially this week, and if that's the case, that can only hurt Gesicki because all of a sudden he's going to be taking some of those routes away. We saw in the first week that Hudson only had 9 snaps, but he ran 8 routes and got 3 targets. So they're all routes that usually Gesicki would run. So if Hudson is indeed in, then Gesicki becomes a worse option as a result. I think Noah Gray is particularly interesting because they will play a lot of 12 personnel. I don't think they're going to want to really lean on using a whole heap of Juju Smith-Schuster, for example. So Gray becomes a more viable option. Noah Fant, I'm really nervous about. I felt really good about him going into the season, but last week they played 90 snaps and he still only ran 36 routes. Which is what he was running most weeks anyway. And it's not like it happened towards the end of the game. It was happening throughout the game. They used a whole lot more AJ Barner. AJ Barner ran 20 routes himself, and we expected him to be primarily a blocking tight end. Instead, he's gotten like 5 targets the last 2 weeks, and he scored a touchdown. So they are clearly trying to get him involved more. Plus, Pharaoh Brown came back, and he played 30 snaps as well. So all of a sudden with Fant, you've got a situation where they're splitting it around among all of those guys. And we even saw some Brady Russell as well. So I don't feel great about Fant for that reason. He just seems to be finding himself back in that committee situation we saw last season, which was an absolute nightmare for fantasy.
Yeah. I feel like that's a good way to describe tight ends, nightmare for fantasy this year. They've all been big disappointments, or at least most of them. George Kittle exception, but so that's our rankings here. So check out check out Ben's website. I'm going to put it on the screen here, ffdfantasyfootball.com. As I said before, 15th in the world in terms of weekly rankings. So make sure you check out Ben's rankings. Go to his website. And that's about it. So any parting thoughts? Do you want to actually, I was going to put this on the screen. There we go. There we go. So yeah, ffdfantasyfootball.com. So do you want to any parting thoughts, or do you want to plug anything?
Yeah.
This, maybe your YouTube channel here.
Yeah, look, please check out my YouTube channel. Very different to what Walt does. Most of my stuff is pre-recorded, but every week I've got a waiver wire show where I go through all the best waiver wire pickups. I've got deep options and shallow options, so that's happening every single week. I've got a streamers and stashes show for any situations where you have bye week or injury issues, and then the start sit show, which looks very similar to what we just went through there. Basically go through, talk through all my rankings, talk about the best guys to start and why in different situations where you might want to go for other options instead. So, look, feel free to check that out. If you're interested, it'd be great to have more views on those. If you've got any questions during the week, you can obviously just comment on those videos, or you can check us out on Instagram at the Fantasy First Down, or on Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O. You saw the website before, of course, is ffdfantasyfootball.com, where I've got all my rankings too. So you can check those out. And I do write a couple of articles and stuff like that during the week too. So you can check that out on the article list too. So anytime you've got fantasy questions right here, feel free to hit us up. I'm happy to help you out.
Yeah, sounds good. Like I said, check out ffdfantasyfootball.com. So asking, have you posted any same game parlays for tomorrow? Not yet. I would have done that already. I had my brother-in-law's engagement party. It's kind of why we started the show a little bit late. Got in way later than I thought. So it was fun, but it was a little tiring with the kids. My son was running around like a maniac, just like did like 30 loops around the whole room. I don't know why, but he was very excited. And yeah, we thought he was going to pass out in the car, and he did not. But so he eventually did go to sleep. So that was nice. So yeah, we will post those. And Sue says, thank you, Ben. Yeah, thank you, Ben, for coming on the show. Always great to have you on. I love your insight with these fantasy rankings, which you've done so well in. And thank you, everyone, for watching and commenting. You really appreciate it. Please hit like, subscribe, comment below, share this video, visit the link in the description for the merch store. All that would be appreciated. And we will have final thoughts on the game Sunday morning. Good luck to everyone betting these games. And next week, we're going to have a full schedule here. Tuesday with, I think, Evan, not quite sure. I have to ask him. It sounds like Evan might be back on the show Tuesday. Wednesday, Kenny. Haven't heard anything from Kenny saying he can't come to the show, so I assume he's going to be on. Thursday with Andy. Andy's confirmed for next Thursday. And then Tom will be back on Saturday. So, like I said, full slate of episodes next week. So looking forward to that. And have a great rest of the weekend, guys. And I will talk to you later.